Recording started. So like I said earlier, this is the session, our final session, and it's for strategic fundraising planning. And our speaker for today is JT. So I'll turn it over to you, JT.
Great, thanks, Kevin. I did notice you skipped out on the last name, but I'll allow you to get away with that today. Welcome everyone to this session. Is going to be strategic fundraising planning, and we're just going to take a look at all the elements that are kind of needed within the fundraising planning process. Whether you're doing a small fundraising or you are embarking on a large capital campaign, maybe you want to build a new building within your community. So we're going to take a look at all the elements that are needed from a planning standpoint. My name is JT Thassa. I'm an adjunct here at the Goodwin College of Professional Studies, teaching in the nonprofit management program. I'm a proud Drexel alum, doing my undergrad at the LeBeau College of Business in accounting, and my MBA, I concentrated in finance. My experience is mixed of both for-profit and nonprofit, working at companies such as BlackRock, DuPont, Penn Medicine, and obviously teaching at Drexel University, both at the Goodwin College of Professional Studies, as well as the LeBeau College of Business. Currently, I am a finance manager at Wharton over at the University of Pennsylvania. So my nonprofit teaching experience really includes not only Goodwin, but also select, nonprofit consulting courses at the LeBeau College of Business. And it's truly been a great experience so far in teaching the nonprofit side of things. So the session today is going to cover strategic planning and when it comes to fundraising. And so here's kind of what you can expect. And I just do want to remind everyone that my contact information is truly at the end of the slide deck. And, Kevin will send that out shortly as well. So if you have any questions, that may be specific to your organization or your current needs, feel free to reach out, and I would love to chat with you on that. And so what we're going to be taking a look at is, obviously we're all best friends and we got the introduction out of the way. So we're going to take a look at what it means to actually have an identity statement. So before you even start asking people for money or plan to ask people for money, one of the things we want to take a look at is kind of look ourselves in the mirror and just say, who are we? What do we do? And some of the elements that really define an organization. Next, we're going to take a look at our current resources and the reason we're even fundraising in the first place. For example, how does our financial health look like? Historically, where have we utilized our funds or donations? Have we mismanaged them? Have we appropriated them in the wrong places or the right places? What's our track record? Because this is ultimately going to help us persuade donors and potential donors to actually give to our organization and our cause. The fourth thing we're going to cover is kind of like the goal and the timeline. So the goal essentially includes the actual amount that we want to raise. And the timeline kind of establishes exactly what is, our allocated timeline. So the timeline is key here because we have to be not only strategic about it, but we have to be realistic about that. For example, if you want to raise $1 million within 2 months, it's slightly going to be hard for a smaller nonprofit. So we're going to be really strategic. 5, we're going to take a look at what it actually means to develop a fundraising budget. The key term in business is that it takes money to make money, and this is kind of the truth from a fundraising standpoint as well. We're going to realize that we need to allocate a certain amount of funds to kind of get the fundraising project started. We're going to have expenses, whether it includes employees, holding special events, renting out venues to have, let's say, a gala or a fundraising lunch or dinner. Next, we're going to take a look at our current and potential donor base. For example, here is a list of our current donors and what our prospective donors, what are our prospective donors looking like? Do we have profiles on them? What is the typical candidate that we're looking for in terms of asking a certain person or a certain group of people for money? 7, we're going to take a look at actual fundraising methods, and due to the evolution of technology, we have multiple methods on how to utilize that. And even in a virtual situation like we are all in now, many nonprofits are turning to social media and online methods of fundraising versus the typical maybe, mail or, door to door or in-person type fundraising methods. We're going to take a look at forecasting and tracking progress. Obviously, once we have our fundraising campaign kicked off, what is the best way to kind of forecast things and kind of track things in a way that so it's easy for our fundraising team to manage. And last but not least, we're going to do a quick wrap up, and I'm going to have some of my contact information at the end of the slide deck. So I do encourage your questions if you have anything, as it pertains to your specific nonprofit. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And so this is one of the first things all organizations should do is kind of look, I call this the look in the mirror slide. And the reason I say that is because the identity statement kind of establishes and reincorporates exactly what we are. For example, before we start asking anybody for money, or even before we kind of put our hand out, it's one of the things that we have to ask ourselves is, how do we define our organization itself? Because this is going to be a key element when it comes to the fundraising process, in which that people want to know what you're about. They want you to be clear. And I call this, in addition to, the look in the mirror slide, it's, you want to have your house in order. So it means to, what do you have a clear vision instilled? Do you have an idea of exactly who you serve? Where do you operate? Do you have a geographical location that you're claiming to serve? What is it that you do exactly? What is it that your nonprofit does? Is it a program? Is it a service? Is it a mix of both? How do you actually deliver those programs and services? Now, a lot of nonprofits are learning how to, and well, not just nonprofits, pretty much everybody in the world is kind of learning how to kind of pivot to an online/virtual environment. So one of the things that we have to kind of understand is, how is your nonprofit kind of servicing and providing the services and implementing some of the programs that it's doing. Last but not least is there a competitive advantage? Competitive advantage in business is kind of defined as having a trait or characteristic that really sets you apart from your competition. Now, a few examples might be, I'm going to go the cell phone market, in which the competitive advantage for Apple is not only the brand recognition, but also the ease of use for their actual programs and software and hardware itself. For example, the iPhone is not only a great phone that's designed well, but also has great software that's considered easy to use. And because of this, Apple can retain a great customer base because of that, because they know that every year, and let's be honest, every year a new iPhone likes to come out. People like to buy it because they know what to expect. It's going to be easy to use. It's going to be really simple. It's not going to be uber complicated. So one of the things that Apple has is that competitive advantage. And one of the things that we have to ask ourselves for a nonprofit is, what is your nonprofit's competitive advantage? What is it that you do well that kind of sets you apart from not only similar nonprofits, but also those other nonprofits within your community? In business, we can define competitive advantage as, many different things. From a nonprofit standpoint, it can really vary. For example, do you offer a very specific, specialized program that no other nonprofit really offers? Do you simply have a great infrastructure in place where that you can deliver a program or service more effectively than your peers? Or three, are you simply in a specific geographical location that nobody is able to serve? So that's one of the questions you have to ask yourselves. And if you're a nonprofit that maybe hasn't established a competitive advantage, is how do we get there through fundraising? That's one of the questions you can also ask and actually develop, because that'll be a good case statement or a good argument that you're putting forward to your donors to actually answer that question. So the identity statement is just, before even asking for one penny, is just asking yourself or asking your organization, what do we currently do? How do who do we serve? Where do we work? What is it that we do? How do we actually do the programs and services? How do we actually deliver? And last but not least, do we have a competitive advantage? And if so, what is it? And just getting your house in order before you even start the fundraising process will go a long way, because during the fundraising process, all nonprofits are putting, are saying that we have our house in order, and we're setting a foundation for the future. So in terms of that, speaking of looking in the mirror, it's kind of looking at our financial books and our ledgers as well. So before we even start asking for money, one of the things we have to ask ourselves, well, what's historical performance on utilizing funds? And what kind of sources of revenue do we have? Do we depend more on donations? Do we find out grants from large foundations or corporate institutions? Do we have a fee for services in which that we charge a small fee for a service that we provide, or do we have other sources of income? And so it's one, understanding what are our current resources, because that allows you to answer the question, why are you asking for more money then? The next one is kind of like the financial health of it. And this is kind of like, I always try to tie in the corporate side or the for-profit side with the nonprofit side. And fundraising is almost like asking a large bank for a loan, because one of the first things that, banks typically do is they assess to see if the candidate, whether it's an individual, an entity, or a corporation, is worthy. Are they credit worthy? And the best way to look at that is through historical facts. So historical performance. How does your operating statement look for the past few years? If there are any, years to go back on. For example, if you're a newer nonprofit, maybe you might have a few months on the books, or maybe a year or two. So one of the things you want to assess is the current financial performance of that. Another thing is that if you have a formal budgeting process, how well have you budgeted? Were you able to plan well? Were you able to be flexible? Are you more conservative when it comes to spending money? And the other thing we look at is kind of the concept of fund allocation. And this is something that's really going to come up in the fundraising process as we build a case, in which that we are articulating to people on where our money is going, where the funds will be utilized. So one of the things that our nonprofits are responsible for is kind of showing donors, for every dollar you donate, this is exactly where the money is going to. So that as a nonprofit that's embarking on the fundraising journey, do you have clear cut data and stats to kind of showcase to anybody, any stakeholder within your nonprofit, to say, here exactly is how money is spent, and here are exactly how donations and grants are spent. And last but not least, it's almost, speaking of credit worthiness, one of the things we have to kind of assess is, what does your current cash balances look like? Or in the financial world, are you operating at a surplus or a deficit? For example, if you are a nonprofit that's been around for a few years, historically at the end of the year or at the end of your fiscal year, how does your financial health look like? Are you, do you have more money? Did you make more money than you spent? Or do you have a history of deficits? And the reason we say that is because potential donors are kind of looking at your organization, with, a fine-tooth comb and with a few magnifying glasses, because they want to understand, if they're donating anything to your organization, how is it going to be properly managed? Because history will tell us, if you have a poorly run organizations from a financial standpoint, that allocating them more money or granting them more money will not turn things around. So one of the things you have to ask yourself is that, do we have a good track record when it comes to that? So next thing we're to cover is, why are you actually fundraising? This is a really important question, and everybody thinks is really straightforward. And this question is really inspired by the corporate boardroom, in which that, part of my experience working at Wharton and even at Penn Medicine is, as various departments and schools ask for money, or cost centers ask for money, one of the questions we ask is, why, and what is it for? And in just a few sentences, I think that anybody that's in charge of a specific school or cost center can articulate exactly why the additional money will be used for. And same thing with nonprofits as well. Um, Fundraising isn't simply to just raise more money for the organization, just to have more money. You want to be very clear cut on the exact number that you're asking, and also be able to defend exactly every penny that you're asking for. So a few reasons for fundraising itself is to sustain existing programs or services. This might be a situation in which that, maybe your donations, historical performance has taken a toll on your donations, and you need to simply fundraise just to sustain exactly what you're currently doing. And that's situation number one. The other one is to improve or expand a program or service. This means that, there are, your organization has identified new ways to improve or expand an existing program or service. So this can include getting additional equipment, for example, doing a renovation or building a new room on an already established building to just serve more additional people. Or you can make the claim that this is to expand a current program. For example, if I'm located in University City and the great city of Philadelphia, I might want to also expand to Center City because there has been there's data and there's facts to support that there are I need to serve needs in the Center City area in addition to University City as well. And so improving and expanding simply means that you're building upon what you're doing, and you want to kind of make it increase the volume and offer it at a potentially new location. And the last thing is creating a new program or service. And this also is done through a process of validation in which that your nonprofit is embarking on a journey to add a new program or service to your existing menu. So for example, if you are supporting a nonprofit that helps veterans, find a job and on the new career path, one of the new programs that you might be instilling is to hire a full-time, employment coach or a counselor at your respective nonprofit to, let's say, to take a look at, to review resumes and to help them build their LinkedIn profile, because, that's what the recruiting and hiring world now is. It's become digital. So in addition to having a great resume, do you have a digital presence as well? So for example, if I'm creating a new program, which is to have in-person one-on-one meetings, or at least when things get better, one-on-one meetings, that's when, I might want to develop a new program. And that new program's cost might be the salary of the career coach or counselor, in addition to other respective program costs that are associated with that. So in asking yourself, why are you fundraising, you need to be very clear on the exact purpose. And we're going to learn that having the stats, data, and figures to support this will go a long way, and actually, and it will lead to success of the actual fundraising itself. And typically, when we ask for funds and we define exactly what program or service it's going to, there's a variety of categories that the funds might fall into. The first one is going to be employees. As mentioned in the previous example, it could be that in order to sustain or improve or simply create a new program, you need more full-time employees, FTEs. And so one of the things that you might have to actually do is hire a few employees, maybe 1, 2, depending on the program itself. And that is justification for the fundraising process. The other thing is operating expenses. So we know that, to operate a nonprofit, there are various operating expenses, whether you're talking about your mortgage, your lease, your rents, utilities, insurance, marketing expenses, the various ways that a nonprofit consumes, goods and services. It's going to cost them. There are expenses allocated to that, and that's going to be in the form of operating expenses. The next use of funds, and this is actually probably one of the more critical ones, is direct program and service cost. This is a fact and figure that a lot of nonprofits are held accountable for. So one of the examples I like to share is I'm currently the finance manager at Wharton for the entrepreneurship program. And one of the things that we really look for is that if we're given a specific budget every year, what is the direct student impact of those funds? How are we allocating the money that we get to directly impact students? And every nonprofit is almost asked this question as well, in which that if you are allocated $1 million, or let's say 100% of X amount of dollars, how much of it is directly going to a program or service? And this is really an important concept, because your donors don't want to hear that 90% of your donation really goes to admin salaries or some other source. They want it to directly impact the program. For example, you wouldn't feel proud, or you would think twice about a nonprofit that kind of allocates 90% of their funds to just simply administrative salaries, but only 10% to direct programs and service. So one of the things that you have to understand is, how much money am I allocating to programs and services from a fundraising standpoint? Some other buckets include technology and equipment. This can also be also related to program and service as well. For example, if I run a community rec center, or community center, and I want to outfit my current computer lab with maybe about 10 or 20 brand new iMacs, so that students can come in and learn multimedia, they can learn graphic design. They can utilize the technology there to actually move along the mission that we currently stand for. Maybe it's one of the missions or one of the visions of our community center is to kind of develop skills and get students interested in a specific field. So that investing in equipment is valid as well, as long as it supports the mission and current vision of your nonprofit. And last but not least, this is the big one, is if your campaign suddenly becomes a capital campaign. So in the nonprofit world, we call capital campaigns a fundraising effort in which that it is for a larger purpose. And that larger purpose is something, for example, is building a new building, or doing renovations. And this usually amount is well in the millions. Okay, so this is when we want to build a brand new community center, or we're completely renovating a really old building and we want to completely redo everything again. So usually a capital campaign gets a little bit more intuitive, simply because of the dollar amounts involved, but the same general concepts are there when it comes to fundraising for capital fundraising process versus maybe a smaller or annual type process. So in looking at and in going forward, this is when we have to make sure our house is in order and we have truly looked at ourselves in the mirror and are honest with ourselves. Because the case statement, or the case as we say, is your argument on why somebody should support your cause or organization. And so I'm going to give you two viewpoints of this. That the first viewpoint is actually what we teach in the nonprofit program of developing a case statement, and the elements that actually go into a case statement. So, and the case statement has truly evolved due to technology. So, in a typical case statement, we see a compelling opening argument or statement. It defines and outlines the history of your organization. It talks about the reason for fundraising needs. It talks about the achievements and impact that an organization has made. And it kind of ties all that up in a conclusion, which is a call to action, in which we say, this is the reason why you should donate. And kind of picking apart these elements, it's obviously the compelling opening statement can be written by anybody. The history of the organization is there as well. But the organizational achievements and impact is something that all organizations should really focus on, because this is you making the case to your donor or potential donor that why is it that they should donate to you. You're kind of proving yourself. And the reason I say the case statement has really evolved is because it's no longer just published on a letter addressed to a potential owner. This has really evolved through social media, in which that case statements or the case itself are made through videos. They're made through infographics. They're made via website. It's no longer the case in which that you get something in the mail and you sit down and you read a really great, powerful letter that's written out to you, but instead you watch a video and you see the direct impact of the organization and the effect that it has on the community. So the concept of the case doesn't simply mean that you can write down these things all in order or in like a 5-paragraph format based on following each element, but it's convincing the audience of why they should donate to your organization. And this is really key here. So the case is simply not just, written in words, but do we have pictures? Do we have videos? Do we have a story to share? Because the concept of storytelling is really important today. And everywhere we look at it, companies are turning to multimedia to kind of get the message out. Utilizing videos and graphics really go a long way. Watching a video has more of an effect than us simply reading a letter, no matter how powerful the letter might be. And the reason we want to make this case is we want to kind of see things from the donor's eyes. And when I say the donor's eyes, I mean from their viewpoint, because a donor is kind of sitting back and they're asking a few questions. The first one is, why should I invest in this organization? Why should I commit my money or my time to this organization? Because through the fundraising process, you're not only going to raise funds, but you're also going to get volunteers that may not be able to give, but they want to volunteer and be involved, or they want to do both. So they ask themselves, why should I invest in this organization through time and money? So this is something that you have to answer. What will the results be? So this is a key component in which that all donors want to see your past track record, how you utilize the funds, what kind of programs and services you have delivered on. And if you get more money, if you get double the capacity or the financial capacity, does that mean they'll get double the output on that? So they want to see almost like a result-oriented pitch in which that there's a clear definition of what has been done and what will be done with the potential funds. The next question they ask is, why should I give now? And how urgent is this cause? And this is something all I guess potential donors kind of ask themselves, is that, yeah, sure, it sounds like a great cause. And they might say, well, there's plenty of great causes in the world, but why should I give now? So this is when, we kind of develop that goal, or we develop a process that if your fundraising process is tied to a specific timeline, that's when you make the pitch, or you convince your audience that, the time to give is now. And we truly have an urgent matter, and it should be supported through facts, figures, data, etc. And last but not least, why me? What's the reason I've been selected? And this is kind of the concept that all organizations should strive to build a relationship with current donors and potential donors, because it's not just about cold calling, it's about having that relationship with them. So maybe that why me question, the reason I'm getting this video or I'm getting this website invitation is because I have donated to the past and I support this organization, and now I'm being selected because they have a larger goal in mind, and that's the reason I've been selected. So one of the concepts to build is that to build a relationship with your donors, it doesn't just start the moment that you send them a letter or you send them an invitation to see your prospective website, but the whole concept is to build that relationship early. Whether it's through getting the messaging out before you start the fundraising process, or just being a reputable organization within the community. Then we build the actual goal. Excuse me. Setting the goal actually means not only establishing exactly how much money is being raised, but also making sure that you're smart with it. So one of the more popular acronyms is SMART, and we often define this as this should be tied into every goal that you create in life. Every goal should be SMART. We say it has to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and kind of time bound. So the specific is very straightforward from our organization process and from the fundraising process. is that it should be very specific, meaning that what is it that your organization is fundraising for? So kind of like the purposes for kind of creating these fundraising process is exactly what are we raising for? Is sustain, to expand or improve, or simply create a brand new program? We want to be very specific. The next one is measurable, and this measurable actually talks about the amount of money that you're actually fundraising for. That money or that budget or that amount that you decide to set as a goal should be measurable from the concepts of it being realistic, it being validated, and three, it being actually possible to even fundraise. It's measurable because we have data to support it. The reason I say that is because, for example, if we are raising for a new basketball court at a rec center or a brand new computer lab, and we have quotes from potential vendors, construction managers, etc., and maybe a few businesses in the community, we want to make sure those numbers are validated. So it's, it's not just saying, yeah, sure, we want to we want to install a computer lab. Well, how much do you think it'll cost, JT? Let's just call it an even million and fundraise based on that. If people are kind of looking at your plan and, and looking at your case very carefully, somebody can easily tell that, to outfit a computer lab with a few computers, even very high-end ones, maybe even Apple ones, it doesn't really cost $1 million. So you want to be careful on that. So you want to make sure it's measurable and it's validated. Three, A stands for attainable, meaning that is it actually realistic? Okay. Is it a number you're just throwing in the wind and you're hoping it sticks? Or, if it's something you're just throwing on the board and you're hoping it sticks, it's not a good plan to have. You've got to be realistic of that. And this actually ties into the concept of the timeline that you set for that. And we're going to get to that in the next slide. Relevant, and relevant really means that even though you're fundraising for, let's go back to that community center and those computer lab examples, that are computer labs and multimedia design and students learning them actually relevant to your organization? Is it relevant to the actual mission that you have on your website? So you want to ask yourself, well, even though it might be a good cause, is that something that solidifies your mission and the vision that you have set out for your organization? So while there are many great causes out there, and there's many great nonprofits out there, is this something that really solidifies the mission of your organization? So it has to be relevant to your specific organization and the programs and services you set out to do. And last but not least, what is the timeline based on that? So while $1 million isn't quite realistic from maybe a 2 or 3 month view for a nonprofit, maybe for a 1-year plan or a 3-year plan, it is somehow relevant. So usually typical capital campaigns last about 2 to 3 years. So, raising a few $1 million in that amount of time is realistic. And, there is a timeline associated with it. And that's my dog saying hi to you guys as the mailman opens the door. I apologize for that. So we're going to take a look at the fundraising timeline. And, I didn't want to get too detailed into it because it shows very, almost a clear path. And I like to go over these, each element very briefly. So one of the first ones is actually the planning and building and setup. And the truth is, some nonprofits barely get out of the planning stage because the whole concept of planning is to see exactly if your organization is, one, ready for a fundraising campaign, and two, is there one even needed? So we kind of call this the concept of a feasibility study. It's typically done in the beginning. Feasibility study can be done internally and externally. Externally is when we hire an organization or a third party, as we like to say, in the form of consultant, for them to come out and just take a look at our whole entire organization. This means interviewing our stakeholders and just asking, a variety of questions to a variety of people. This includes our board members, our current leadership, our volunteers, those that benefit from our programs and services. And based on that, they set out, they give guidance on recommendations on to proceed with the fundraising process or not. So a lot of organizations never even kind of say, leave the garage or, even get running because they simply are not ready to have a fundraising campaign, or if they were even deemed ready, they would not be successful from a fundraising standpoint. So the plan, build, and setup is just kind of the initial process. But obviously, if the plan is truly there, one of the beginning points is to actually build out and plan for the actual campaign itself, to understand what are the resources that you need, how many people will you need, what is the process like. Um, the second process is often the kickoff or the promotion. This is when your campaign officially goes live. So this can, from a capital standpoint, there's always a formal kickoff event from a large capital campaign. But for a small fundraising process or a small fundraising campaign, it could be as simple as just holding a community event and just encourage people to come out, because you're not only raising funds, but you're also trying to generate awareness for that. So as you kick off your campaign or your fundraising process, you're often encouraged to inspire and remind. So just because you kicked things off doesn't mean the full energy of the kickoff event carries through all the way to the end of the actual process or campaign process itself. You're often encouraged to inspire and remind. And this is a process of just social media campaign or a blitz of just engagement type activities, in which that you're reminding people that this campaign is still going on, there's still time to donate, and you're kind of reissuing or reminding people of your case, so that your original case shouldn't be just one video for the campaign and that's it, but it should be multiple videos inspiring people and reminding them exactly what your organization is actually doing. And in the middle of all that, you're often, you're often encouraged to engage potential donors, current donors, and future donors as well. So potential donors are interested. They're coming out to events, and they're kind of maybe on the fence or deciding to actually donate or not to donate. Current donors means that they have a track record within your organization of potentially giving, and they're getting ready to contribute. And I call future donors those people that are able to see your messaging. They're able to actually receive your letters. They're able to see your social media posts, and they're potentially thinking about not only donating but potentially volunteering and other things. AKA, they're getting
Hey,
interested
JT,
in the organization. Yes.
it just went out.
Okay. Can you hear me now? No.
I'm hearing JT just fine.
Oh, are you? It's just me? Okay.
If anyone else is not hearing JT, just let us know in the chat.
Yeah, I got the chat up right here too. Okay. Yes, just if you guys can't hear me, just let me know.
Yeah.
All right, I can hear you again now. All right.
Great. So the concept of future donors simply means that these are potential donors that are seeing your messaging, and they're being reminded that your organization exists, and that they're being introduced to some of the programs and services that you offer within the community, whether it comes in the form of social media posts or they're simply seeing an advertisement or a poster on their way home from work or school. And last but not least, the thanking is probably critical as well. So the thanking is usually the wrap up of the campaign itself, is when that you're thanking potential donors for their donations, their pledges, and you're moving forward with what's currently being done. And so even though the word engage comes before thank, the concept of engage and the concept of engagement really happens throughout the whole entire timeline here. You're constantly engaging, potential stakeholders, potential donors, future donors, whatever you want to call them. You're constantly engaging them and getting the message out. So the word engage and engagement really never stops anywhere. So it constantly goes on. So you're reminded to continue engaging them even after the completion of not only the fundraising process, but you actually built or you actually have achieved exactly what the money was raised for. For example, you built the new building, you got the computers, you got the new basketball court for the rec center. So it actually means the concept of engagement actually means, good stewardship and just continue to engage them even in the future. And so one of the things that we're going to touch on and before we wrap up is the whole concept of the fundraising budget itself. So this whole concept of it takes money to make money is really outlined here. And the fundraising budget can really vary. And one of the things you'll see here is salaries, wages, benefits, and taxes. This is just a full-time employee cost. And one of the reasons that we might have this is because we might have to hire additional workers or allocate a current employee's time to the fundraising campaign. For example, smaller nonprofits may not have a full employee that can dedicate their time to the fundraising process, so that we often see that their time is really split between the fundraising campaign and their natural original duties within the nonprofit itself. Sometimes in this situation, we might realize we might need to hire additional people, additional workers. This might come in the form of a full-time employee, a part-time employee, or simply an outside consultant that works maybe for a few months with us just to get things set up. Additional costs includes marketing, communications, technology, postage, printing, professional services. We often kind of utilize services, whether it is some sort of legal services, maybe professional marketing services, or those outside consultants that specialize in nonprofit fundraising. Additional costs also include rental fees and catering for our maybe kickoff events, our dinners or galas, etc. Usually people, like to, be wined and dine when going through fundraisers and having a great event. So these events usually carry costs such as this, right? And include transportation, general supplies, and just various costs. So one of the things to keep in mind is that this budget should be tied into your overall goal. For example, if you want to raise $1 million and you realize it's going to take about $50,000 to kind of get that going, your overall goal should be $1 million plus $50,000 as well. So we have to remind people that your budget should be tied into the overall goal, because ideally the campaign should cover your nonprofit's expenses for that. And the other thing I want to touch on is just donors. And I'm not going to go into this too much for the sake of time, but there's 3 things that you can do for both current and potential donors. One is analyze current donors and just kind of ask yourself, what's the current giving capacity or past giving capacity of your donors, and assess potential new giving capacity. What's their engagement and relationship to your organization like? Are they motivated? Are they constantly engaged? Or were they simply a donor that just donated a few years ago and you have never heard from them again? So you want to create potential profiles for both current and potential donors. In the nonprofit course that I teach, we often create donor profiles for them, and they typically include information such as biographical information, financial/wealth indicators, and also an estimated giving capacity. And I know this is really subjective here, but the whole concept is we are kind of creating an estimated amount that we can potentially expect from a potential donors. And the world, and with the internet, there's a lot of information that we can find out about people from just utilizing just the power of Google itself. So as you're screening potential donors, the internet is simply a great place to start. But I know, there are companies out there that can kind of provide these services for you at a cost. So this might be something you want to budget as well. And last but not least is to touch upon the workshop that we did two days ago about good record keeping. Is we want to make sure that we kind of organize our process of potential donors, and it doesn't have to be a paid for large donor database or anything like that. It could be as simple as a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet in which that we're kind of jotting down all the potential donors. We're kind of, categorizing them and some information via some header data, and just say that, we're going to call them, potential donor 1. We're going to call them a level 1 donor, and maybe they can give up to $100. And by researching and organizing that data in a central place, it's going to make the fundraising process a lot more easier for everybody. And so these are just 3 things you can do to just understand your current and potential donors, if you already have it or you don't at all. And fundraising methods. So how do we actually do it? Well, in this day and age, I think there's only a few that would actually, there's only a few methods that would actually be allowable during this COVID-19 situation. So typical fundraising methods can include direct mail appeals, official fundraising events such as fundraising dinners, galas, etc. It could be an online-based method in which that not only from a website standpoint, but maybe webinars and other live streamed events in which that the typical events that we would do in person and they're now streamed online due to whether it's a situation like this or maybe that's just the name of the game now, as people prefer more virtual events that they can just see from the comfort of their own home. The other traditional source is a cell phone or a phone, and typically we think of like just calling people and asking for donations, but due to new technology, we can receive payments electronically. They have a lot of text a certain number to donate $10 to JT's nonprofit. They have a lot of resources that way. Popular money, popular payment systems are now electronic. You can receive a payment for your nonprofit via Venmo, via PayPal, via the Cash App. So there's a lot of online or electronic versions that you can utilize too. The whole concept of asking for money simply doesn't mean somebody has to write you a physical check or they have to give you cash. There's a lot of electronic resources out there. And some people might actually prefer this because a lot of people wouldn't mind just simply texting a number and knowing that a donation has been made rather than writing out the official check or just entering their credit card information in the system. And last but not least, when potentially possible, there's nothing more powerful than a direct or in-person type method of fundraising, because this is when you make that direct appeal to that person in front of you. And as a reminder, and we're going to take a look at that donor pyramid soon, is that your top donors, your 20% of your donors that essentially contribute about 80% of your overall funds should be done in person. So as you think about the fundraising process and you create hierarchies for potential donors, one of the things to keep in mind is to understand the type of potential donor you're dealing with and the type of method they would prefer. So one of the things to keep in mind is taking a look at this donor pyramid. So donor pyramid is a great way for organizations just to track potential donors by levels and amounts. So in the bottom of the pyramid, here you have, let's kind of skip out on the prospective donors, but first-time givers. We can expect multiple gifts from multiple people, but the amount is slightly going to be lower. In the middle of the pyramid, we can get a medium-sized amount of gifts just from a moderate amount. So, medium amounts from a medium amount of people. And on the top, we get very few gifts, maybe 1 or 2 large gifts from a very few number of people. So this donor pyramid can be actually organized, multiple ways, and it can be tracked a few ways. One of the examples below the actual pyramid itself is that a donor pyramid in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. And here we see the gift amounts, the number of prospects, and the cumulative total. And this is kind of the idea that I want to put together, is that if this can be formatted in a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, and it can be organized by donor names and profiles, it's going to go a really long way. So one of the things you have to understand is you have to be able to kind of add donor categories to your respective potential donors, and just follow up on that. So the donor pyramid simply doesn't mean that we create this really good looking graphic that shows, okay, here are my smaller gifts for many people, medium gifts from a medium amount of people and large gifts from a very few people, but you are actually able to track it. For example, in this example, we're expecting 150,000 from one. We're expecting one gift, but we're only expecting it for potentially 4 people. So you're hoping that you have the ability to raise that amount of money, and this way, this allows you to actually track the whole concept of, you know, asking more people for money and knowing that you have the amount of prospects in there to cover that amount. So a good way of just organizing this doesn't mean to actually build the graphic itself, but just to mean that you can go ahead and generate something in Microsoft Excel, or just a simple Word document that can track the actual cost itself. And so I'm going to go ahead and recap and take any potential questions that you may have, or, you know, I look forward to your email at the end. So just as a recap to all this, I know this might be a lot, even in a 1 hour frame, is one of the first things that all organizations have to do is kind of get their house in order and look in the mirror and just ask yourself, you know, do you have, you know, a mission or vision that's set in stone for your organization? And has your organization historically carried out that mission? And then take a look at needs versus wants. This is something that all organizations are kind of have messed up in the past, is just asking for more simply to ask for more. And this can get pretty dangerous as well. So one of the things all organizations has to do is needs versus wants. Sure, it's great to have $1 million for your organization. It might set us up for the future. I can hire extra employees. And even if a pandemic such as COVID-19 were able to hit, I can still weather the storm knowing that I have a cash reserve, but it still doesn't answer is something that your organization actually needs. And when a donor actually asks certain questions or asks for the proof through the case, you want to make a compelling story to answer that. You want to understand your donors, because, you know, they are, you know, they provide the blood for your organization. They are, you know, the blood that runs through the veins of your organization. So you want to truly understand and engage with them. You want to be strategic about the methods you select. You know, especially a COVID-19 situation like this, nonprofits are switching to that virtual online method, in which that they simply have no other choice. But also, how well are you implementing that method? Are you just making the case by just posting one picture on Instagram or Facebook? Or are you developing videos that really captures stories and messages that, you know, that really, you know, that people have benefited from the programs and services? And last but not least, you're able to track and manage your process. And this tracking and managing can be simply done in, you know, a database program that tracks donors, or simply in Microsoft Excel that says, I have set out to raise $1 million in 2 years, and I'm 5 months in, and I have raised half of that. So what is my plan of generating, you know, the remaining amount of that, and how will I do it? And do I have good information to share with my team on the progress of that? For example, if I'm expecting $5 million or $1 million gift from 4 people, have I followed up with all of them? And if that fails to, you know, develop any fruit, do I have other processes in place to raise that money from? And last but not least, thanking and engaging them. And the concept, the key word here is engagement. Even after they donate, are you constantly engaging them? Even if you have a potential donor that is still on the fence about donating, are you constantly engaging them? Because this whole constant loop of engagement is really what sets apart successful fundraisers from, you know, unsuccessful ones. Because the whole concept of engagement means that we're not only potentially raising money, we're generating awareness, and that awareness can go a long way in generating not only money, but also potential volunteers. And it just gets the word out about your organization itself. So I'm going to stop right there, and I'm just going to remind everyone of my contact information that's actually here, jt365@drexel.edu. Also posted is my LinkedIn if you want to connect with me that way. And I would be happy to take any questions now. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now, and I would be happy to go back to any slides to cover potentially.
Thanks,
Can
JT.
Can I just say that thank you also, JT, that for those of you who have attended all of the sessions, I think you can see this thread line that's come through about donor engagement and cultivating donors and the importance for strong communication with donors and really helping donors to feel appreciated and not just really like the money cow to help you achieve your goals, but it's more of a partnership in some ways to help you achieve those goals of your mission. So I just wanted to say that because I think it's really important to sort of tie all of these together since this is our last in the series.
So also, and if you don't mind, since this is our last in the series, I want you to take a couple of minutes to talk about the nonprofit program that you have at the Goodwin College.
Sure. So the MS in Nonprofit Management, oh, no, can you hear me now? Okay. The MS in Nonprofit Management is a 4-credit full master's degree program. JT teaches in the program, as do I. And it really helps prepare students for whether they want to start their own nonprofit or they want to work in a nonprofit and work their way up to an ED or an executive director position, regardless of the size of the nonprofit. Could start off in a small one, could then go to something the size of like Ronald McDonald House or the American Cancer Society. So and one of the key differences from this program versus others is that we have numerous opportunities for students to actually engage with nonprofits. We have 2 courses called the Nonprofit Workshop, in which students will work with a nonprofit and the faculty member. Could be to solve a problem, could be to establish maybe some element of programming, things of that nature. And then we also have, which is also very different, a third opportunity where we want our students to volunteer in their community. Because I'm often stunned when I've spoken to executive directors who have not truly volunteered. Yes, they've gone for 4 hours here or 3 hours there, but they've never been a true volunteer, so they don't understand. And if you attended the session last week, volunteers have very different motives than paid staff members do. So I think it's really important, and that class helps you to wear both the hat of the volunteer as well as thinking from a management perspective how volunteers can better be prepared, trained, treated, and so forth. And then the final opportunities in our two series capstone course, in which students can either tackle a subject area that is really, really important to them that maybe we didn't go into in all detail. No program can hit every element of an industry. So you can take a really deep dive and over 2 courses become a real expert in that area. Or for the last nonprofit workshop, you can actually potentially work with the nonprofit to actually implement whatever you were working on with them. So there's that opportunity with the MS in Nonprofit Management. And again, you're more than welcome to reach out to me, acw334@drexel.edu. And I can put that in the chat in just a second. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. But we also have a second non-credit opportunity, which is our non-credit, which is our nonprofit certificate. Again, it's non-credit. It's very reasonably priced. It's through our continuing professional education program. And if you reach out to me, I can also forward you on to the correct person. And I can say I have not done all of the certificate, but I specifically did the entire course on budgeting because for me, that's my weakest area. JT, you didn't hear that. That's my weakest area in working and running nonprofits, but it's really in depth. You take little quizzes along the way. It's very, very well done. It took me about 2 hours to go through that entire module, and I think there are 10 modules in the program, just to give you an idea of timing. And it's under $1,000, so it's really very well priced. So there are 2 great educational opportunities if you want to, really take a deeper dive. And I do hope that our plan is to continue to offer these workshops, and just keep communicating with the community about what you need and how we can help you, as opposed to us just stepping in and telling you what we think you need. So I really encourage you, when Kevin sends out the surveys, to be very open and honest, and what was missing, what didn't we address, what would you like us to address, because that's how we put this series of workshops together, was based on our sort of one-time discussion and panel discussion last fall. So we want to keep helping the community help itself. So with that, if there are any questions about that, I can also help answer those too.
Awesome. Questions for Ann, questions for JT, questions for me, although I don't know what questions you might have for me. Floor is open. If you'd like that, you can type it in the chat section. We have a smaller group today, so feel free to just raise your hand and we'll put you on verbally, on audio. Doesn't look like we have anybody with any questions this time. This will be the first session with no questions. Okay, then here's how we'll end this. I want to make sure that everybody who is here gets the, okay, here we go. Tamika, I've had a few events in the past, but not a 501c3. Can I still fundraise?
In order to fundraise and have the donor be able to get the tax deduction, you have to have the 501c3. You can fundraise and make it very clear that the donor does not get any kind of tax break. So we see those on GoFundMe's often. Someone, maybe they have to have surgery and they're a single mom or something along those lines. People are donating that money, but they're not able to take a tax deduction on their, through the IRS for that.
Yeah, and just to tag on that, certain cities and states and counties have guidelines of registration policies when it comes to fundraising itself. So even if, as long as you're not openly saying, hey, by the way, you can donate to me, and even though I'm not, incorporated that way, you can still tax, you could deduct your taxes. As long as you're not doing that, I think some counties allow you to just still fundraise, but as long as you fill out the proper paperwork. So it's kind of like check with your local state policies to ensure you're properly registered. And honestly, in most cases that I've seen, it just requires nonprofits just to register with the local county or state. That's all it is. No additional processing needed.
And I think that's a really important point, that it doesn't matter whether you're starting a for-profit business or a nonprofit, organization. You always have to follow not only the federal laws, such as like with the IRS, but also your state, local, and so you could have county regulations or laws, and you can have city or township counties and laws. So you really have to do your homework and make sure that you understand. And again, one option out there from a legal perspective is Philly VIP. They have a team of lawyers that work with individuals in the community who are trying to start nonprofits. They do other things as well, but the lawyers will meet with you pro bono to help you get whatever you need, whether it's trying to get your articles of incorporation or your paperwork, for the state or for the federal government. So it is an opportunity, and I'll just put that in the chat that it's Philly VIP.
And also, while you're doing that, Ann, and I'm going to ask you or JT to take what I say and make it correct, because I'm probably going to screw it up somewhere along the way. But when you're starting a 501c3, it can be a long, drawn out process. But if you don't expect to make over $50,000 or generate $50,000, isn't there like a fast track way of submitting for your 501c3? By fast track, I mean saying that you can get the 501c3 letter from the IRS within as little as 60 to 90 days.
You Okay, well, so you have to also get an EIN number. You can get that like
Right.
instantaneously.
Right.
In some cases, the longest period of time is your 2-week period in which you need to advertise that you are starting a nonprofit. You know, it really depends on the backlog, and you know, it can happen quickly. It can take a little bit longer. The reality is that once you know you want to start a nonprofit, start the start the paperwork, but keep in mind that there are elements, and that's where I go back to that checklist that you should have gotten when you first registered for for this workshop series, because that checklist will take you step by step with what you need to do, including like figuring out who your board is going to be, because you
Right.
can't file certain paperwork without identifying who your board is. You have to have a physical address. I mean, it can be a PO box, but you have to have a physical address, but you also have a physical address to store your documents, even if it's your home address, but that has to be in the paperwork. So like, for example, as I said, I'm, you know, on the board of WEPAC, and we're looking at whether or not we actually need to have a physical office right now. And we don't, other than we have to have a location for our paper, all of our, you know, legal documents to be housed. Again, it can be in someone's house, but we have to have that address on file.
Great. And we had someone, she just wanted verification, double check. Pennsylvania requires a fundraising certificate. The certificate is good for 1 year and expires based on your fiscal calendar. And JT says that that's correct, and he put the link that you actually go to in order to get that certificate. Awesome. And thanks for that clarification for me. So at that point, I want to tell everybody thank you again, and we will be sending out today's presentation to everyone. I have it from JT, so I'll make sure I get that out to you guys before the end of today. Once again, you have Ann's email address. I will be sending out the survey to everybody before the week is out, and feel free to reach out to any one of us. You'll have our contact information in the email as well. So, almost hate to say goodbye, but it's been great, and I want to say thank you to everybody again. And when this whole crisis is over, hopefully we'll get a chance to meet face to face. You guys take care and enjoy the rest of your day.